Hello everybody, my name is Pravus. Let's try COVID, the Outbreak, a new indie strategy game being released by a small Polish indie company called Jujubee, who was kind enough to sponsor today's video. As you can certainly tell from the title, COVID, the Outbreak is a game based around the current coronavirus world health crisis. You are the leader of the global health organization, and your task is to contain the spread of a coronavirus and save humanity. To accomplish this, you will have to allocate world resources and pressure nations to follow your chosen path of containing the spread of the disease, while also working toward developing a vaccine and trying not to panic the world population. Of course, all of this is touching on very sensitive issues right now in the world today, but COVID the Outbreak attempts to be very educational, offering you methods of containing the spread and policy decisions that are reflective of what is actually being pursued by different areas of the world today. The developers have emphasized to me that they very much value the educational aspect of COVID the Outbreak, and they're trying to encourage people to behave in a reasonable and responsible manner during this pandemic. And on top of that, they have also stated that they will be giving 20% of their sales in the month of May and June towards vaccine development. So big kudos to Jujubee for what they're creating here. Not only are they creating a pretty cool idea for a strategy game based on real issues, but they're also making sure that they contribute some of those sales toward helping benefit the world at large. Let me go ahead and start up a new game, and I'll show you how this works. As a quick note, I am playing on a pre-release beta build, so there might be some hot code, but if we see any, I'm sure it'll get fixed before release. Okay, so here we are in the world map. Now, in just a second, it's going to ask me to choose a difficulty mode for the game. We have easy, normal, and hard, which basically just affects your win condition, depending on how strong your vaccine needs to be and the global infected percentage needs to be under a certain number. Let's just go for normal mode for now. That should be fine. And it looks like in this particular game, France, Mauritania, and Uruguay are reporting their first infected cases. So these are the guys right down over here who have been hit with the first round of COVID-19. Now, as the leader of the Global Health Organization, there are a few numbers that we will need to keep track of. First, we have the number of infected people and the death count, because this disease does have a mortality rate right off the bat. In fact, if you look down here, we can see it's estimated to be 2.75%. We also have the number of people who have recovered and become immune, which is great if you want to go for a herd immunity approach. However, do be advised that as the disease mutates and new strains are discovered, that immunity might go away and people become susceptible again, so that can always throw a wrench in your plans. We have three primary resources that we need to manage: money, science points, and medical supplies, which we will use to influence the nations and try to develop a cure. All three of these resources are contributed to varying degrees by the different nations of the world. The higher the population, the more wealth in general, the more than they are going to contribute. And we can actually see a donation rate right here is at 10% as far as what they are contributing. The more scared people are, the higher this donation rate can be. Down here at the bottom, you see your panic meter, which actually describes just how scared the world population is. Again, the more terrified they are, the more people will take this disease seriously and might respond to your influence. At the same time, if it gets too high, people might start to disrespect the Global Health Organization or write you off entirely, and you may find that some nations fall into anarchy, at which point you won't be able to exert much of any influence on them at all. So that's something you need to very carefully manage. We have three units at our disposal at the beginning of the game. We have a security unit, which actually tries to deal with some of those riots and also secure the borders to prevent more disease crossing land borders. We have a diplomat, which can travel across the world and request units and also increase or decrease fear, depending on what you're trying to do. And a medical specialist, which can help boost up medical production or science production and eventually improve curability and try to get more people free of the disease. Down here at the bottom, we have research and regulations, and this is very, very important. First off, in this category here, disease control, we have two different trees that we can follow for our response to the disease. First off, we have by any means necessary, which I would consider the more authoritarian approach to disease management. This leads to things like body disposal and acquiring supplies, falsifying results to maintain national stability, etc. I'm going to call this the bad path, the immoral path. Then we have spread prevention, which may be less effective, but at least is a little bit better at maintaining some stability and freedoms. We have contingency plans, we have closing down private businesses, quarantining, securing the borders, preparing disinfectant, etc. And then if we move on to the next section, we have R&D, and this is where we will conduct our disease research and try to become more efficient with our tests and our treatment methods or approach for herd immunity, as I was saying before. Then we have headquarter development, which is very good for increasing your influence with other nations, as well as trying to improve how much money you gain. And finally, vaccine development, at which point we can build a testing facility and start working on different antigens to develop a vaccine. You can imagine research and development is very important, and there are a lot of different ways to approach dealing with this coronavirus. Lastly, we also have decrees over here, which are resolutions which typically will raise global panic but make them take the disease a lot more seriously. For example, if we were to declare this to be an epidemic right now, global panic would raise by 10 out of 100, so we'd see this panic meter going up, but also the number of people who would be getting infected will reduce by 5%. So it helps reduce how many people are going to be getting sick in the first place. One of the first things I'm going to do is go for a fundraiser resolution, which is going to increase global panic, which makes them take it more seriously so I can increase donation rates, but also I will get extra money and medical supplies from the rest of the world. So let's go ahead and confirm this. The last thing I want you guys to take a look at here is the vaccine research lab. We will have to come back to this, but as we unlock different antigens, we will be placing vaccine elements on this here DNA thing. We can actually show how this looks right here, and start evaluating different aspects of a vaccine, trying to get something that is effective and can stave off any additional spread of the disease. There are quite a few map modes in the game to try and give you as much data as possible to make informed decisions. Right now, we're looking at the infection spread view to see which countries are affected, but we also have levels of panic, where you can see that fear will be rising. We have, let's say, money contribution, so we know which nations are contributing the most to our organization, medical supplies, science points, etc. Range of buildings, which I haven't shown you yet. Lots of good stuff here. Plenty of data to go around. Now, one of the first things I know this game is going to ask me to do is build a headquarters, which is a building type. And actually, I haven't shown you buildings. Let's do that real quick. Any of these little hexes right here are building slots, and you can build a number of different buildings, let's say right here in Burma. So we have biological labs, which means all nations within range will increase their science points generation, or perhaps their medical supplies production. We can train up new units like diplomats, security agents, etc., increase influence over nations, increase the curability of the patients, etc., etc. Again, one of the first things I want is the headquarters, and I'm actually going to build this in Burma. It's going to cost me all of my money, a lot of my science, and a fair bit of my medical supplies, but this is going to be well worth it for me. The headquarters is going to increase the money, science, and medical supplies and influence of all nations in its range. And I happen to know for a fact that India and China, having the highest populations in the world, are the largest producers of money, medicines, and science points to our organization. So building an HQ in range of both of them is very good. And here's a quest actually to do exactly that. I'm going to go ahead and finish that up next. So it's now building right over here. You can see how this is going to work. And you can see we also have 2 days left for our fundraiser resolution. As this is finished, you can see that the panic meter has gone up as people are starting to take this virus a little bit more seriously. And the more fear that we have, we can go up to this global health organization and increase the donation rate, which ultimately will increase how much money, science, and medical supplies we are getting from around the world. The downside of this is we will be seeing less influence with individual nations. Now, if we take a look at China, for example, and take a look at some disease options, for example, and then scroll down a little bit to look here, we can see that right now we have 48.33 influence over China. If we were to do anything like, let's say, limit public gatherings and stuff, we lose influence. Influence is a very, very important resource. This is how we get more people to cooperate with us, to try and give us additional resources. This is how we pass most of our resolutions. So we have to be careful not to raise the donation rate too high, otherwise nations will no longer want to cooperate with the Global Health Organization. Fortunately, in the case of China, we can increase that influence a little bit by building the headquarters nearby. Now, every building does have a range associated with it, and if a country even partially touches that radius, it's going to get those bonuses. So in the case of our headquarters, it's going to affect both China and India and several other countries in Southeast Asia. Now, the problem with these buildings here is you cannot build more than one building within range. So all these spaces, for example, have now been blocked off, but we can still build down here in Cambodia, and that radius should then affect everyone else that is in Southeast Asia. So you have to stagger your buildings very carefully to get the most impact. Now, one of the mistakes that I made in this game was to immediately spend all my resources trying to get as many buildings as possible to increase my medicine, science, and money production, thinking if I build up a really good economy, I will be fine. I actually don't advise this because resources are going to be very tight. You can see we are only gaining like 1,000 money per month. And in a game where you really want to have a cure out by a couple of years, that little bit of money can really add up. So you don't want to go around and spend every resource you've got. You have to be very sparing and targeted in your approach. To try and make this a little bit easier, I like to make use of the diplomat unit at the beginning of the game because they can walk around and request medical supplies and science. In this case, for example, in the nation of... Where are we right now? Hang on. We are in, I think, Nicaragua. There we go. We can request that they give us some of their science. They will lose some science and they will lose curability for the disease. They are more susceptible because they give that up, and we lose a lot of influence, but it gives me up to 3,000 more science, which makes a big difference considering I'm only generating 131. So we're going to go ahead and request this, and I'm going to have my diplomat basically moving for every country in the world, asking for more and more stuff. This will take some time, but if we spread it out by going to lots of different nations and requesting things rather than just stay in one place constantly asking for more supplies, we shouldn't use up all of our influence, and it gives me a little bit more time to build up a bank of medicine and science so I can respond to the disease once it starts to spread. I'm also going to issue another decree right now with an epidemic resolution and simply declare to the world that this is, in fact, an epidemic. This is going to raise global panic, again, which can be good for us right now, but we have to carefully manage this number, and reduces how many people are going to be infected in the future. So this is going to be good, and it will take me a little time. Now let's go to research and regulations. In the beginning of the game, I do recommend upgrading your headquarters a little bit. Going for that extra international influence can certainly be helpful. You can see it uses up some medical supplies, science, and some money, but otherwise it is affordable, and it's going to take us a few days, 15, in order to build this thing up. Do be warned that if you have a unit that is performing some sort of a mission in a nation and then you move it out of that nation, you will automatically cancel and you do not get the resources back. So don't go moving your units all willy-nilly. But now that we requested that from Nicaragua, we're going to move over here to Honduras. They will be arriving in a couple of days. There we go, and we can do the same sort of thing. I would like to request some medical supplies. Unfortunately, these guys don't have a lot of medical supplies, so that's not going to be an option for me. We can, however, request some more science, so that is what I'm going to do. Now, up here in the top, you see that there is this timeline, and over time, special decisions and events are going to happen, such as deciding whether or not we want to have the Rio Carnival in Brazil. Now, right now, Brazil is not infected, but there is a good chance that it will be if we are not careful because French Guiana is nearby and is infected. So, we don't necessarily want this event to proceed as normal. That could result in things backfiring for the GHO. I think we would have to say that right now the event could take place with a limited limitations and restrictions, or in this case, maybe without a live audience. This might upset some people and reduce our influence a little bit, but I think it's going to be necessary because I bet you Brazil is going to be infected pretty soon. Actually, the fear rating just went up, so I can actually increase the donation rate a little bit more. Whoops, hang on, there we go. You can see that our amount of money per week has gone up a little bit, so now we are actually making a fair bit more cash. Really, inciting a bit of a panic at the beginning of the game is surprisingly effective if you want to make sure that people take this disease seriously. And we really can't afford to have people not take it seriously, so this is the strategy that I tend to follow. Uh-oh, the virus just mutated. This does happen on occasion. We could announce the mutation, which increases global panic a little bit more, or we could spend some money to try and keep things quiet, but this can backfire and people will lose faith in the GHO, so I'm going to go ahead and announce the mutation. Up here, we can see that the virus has moved up to level 2 out of 100. So over time, this thing can become more dangerous. As it increases in its level, it becomes more contagious and more lethal as well. So ideally, we respond fast enough that this disease cannot actually wipe out the entire world. We have upgraded our HQ. We also passed a resolution for animal control, hence why panic is now up to 50, basically, out of 100. I'm going to also go ahead and pass the global pandemic resolution. Might seem a little bit early, but there's a 100% success chance that we can reduce the infection spread by another 15% in these countries. And the more we can head this off early, probably the better for us. I'm also going to request some extra medical supplies from Mexico. Then we're going to go to research and development and go to the headquarters down over here, and I'm going to go for, let's say, crowdfunding initiative, which can get me a little bit of extra cash. Still important to try and get as many of these resources going on early on if you can. Every month, we are going to get a summary of the world, which tells us how many people have been infected, how many people have recovered, how many became immune out of that, how many died, and the panic level. Also, we can see a bit more for our money, medicine, and science income. And if we do want to shut down air, land, and sea travel, we can certainly do so, but there are downsides to that. If we were to shut down entire economies, for example, go to France and say we want to limit public gatherings, they will do so because right now they are terrified, and this is going to reduce the number of people infected infected in France, yes, but it also will reduce the amount of income that France can contribute. The more we shut things down, the more the economy starts to slow and the less resources that are going to be available to contribute to the GHO. So it's a balancing act between trying to stop the spread of the disease while keeping the economy running as much as possible and tracking toward a cure as fast as possible. And this is where the nuance of the game really picks up. I do at the very minimum recommend going for the limiting of social gatherings as soon as enough fear has built up. It's a relatively cheap initiative and it's pretty effective, and the more you can stop it from spreading in those initial 3 countries, the easier of a time you're going to have as the game progresses. You can see, by the way, down here, our headquarters has been built. So if we go to our medicine money contribution, previously I think China was giving us like 1.1k. Now it's giving us about 1.5k. So having the headquarters placed here has certainly helped with production of money, medicine, and science. Now, as people get sick, they will start consuming medicine as well, so do be aware that the more the disease spreads, the harder it's going to be to get those much-needed medical supplies. Again, all the more reason to try and stymie it before it gets out of control. Global panic has now gone over 50%, in no small part because I kind of did that myself. I mean, I've passed a lot of decrees. We are taking this disease super duper seriously the second it reared its ugly head, so that's one of the reasons that global panic levels are as high as they are. And there's a lot of danger with this, but again, if I can continue increasing that donation rate, you can see now, we could get up to 73% if we wanted to. This, again, does reduce our influence, so it makes it harder for us to walk around asking for cooperation and resources using our diplomat and our other units, such as the security unit or the specialist. But in this case, especially in the early game, I think getting the extra money and supplies could be well worth it, because it lets me start contributing toward vaccine research a heck of a lot faster. You can also see here that trying to limit public gatherings in France actually did fail. There is always a failure chance, in part based on how much influence you have in those different nations. So, Mauritania didn't want to listen to me. France didn't want to listen to me. Uruguay didn't want to listen to me. That's not a good sign. Also, it looks like Sweden has now been infected. We can try to get them to limit their public gatherings as well, and we can eventually try again in France, but it may or may not be successful. We were, however, able to successfully close some schools in these countries, which does reduce that spread by about 10%, so that does help a little bit. This is not a fast game, just FYI. It tries to be as accurate to the real situation that people are facing as possible. As I said, this game tries to be very educational in nature, and you're not going to see the disease suddenly ramp out of control and destroy the world within like 3 months, nor are you going to be able to get a vaccine that quickly either. It's going to be careful laying of groundwork in order to try and get the nation of the world to unite under your leadership and actually take this threat seriously, pool resources, and eventually develop a cure. And at best, I've been able to get a vaccine out in about a year and a half, which actually tracks with real-life projections and simulations. So again, this game really strives for realism, which I think is really, really cool about it. By the way, let's take a look at France, and you can see simulation charts right here. Over the next 30 days, it doesn't look too bad, but if you take a look at the next year, we can see that France has about 1 year to go before all of a sudden everything is going to go terribly. So we need to continue stymieing the spread of the disease. Otherwise, in about a year, we may find that France descends into utter anarchy. We did finish with our crowdfunding initiative to get me some extra cash. I am now going to go ahead and go for a PR department to get me some extra international influence, because we need every little bit of help we can get down there. And then I'm going to start working on trying to prevent the spread at least a little bit, maybe reduce the global panic a little bit, keep things kind of simmering, kind of in the middle of the road if at all possible. Work on some disease research, trying to increase our medical supply and our science income by another 3%. Then we will focus our efforts probably on building up a vaccine testing facilities as quickly as we can. But we need to be keeping an eye on all of these different nations that are starting to find more and more spread. We could close down some public institutions. Again, that reduces the amount of money we get, but if it helps prevent the spread, I think it is well worth it, so we're going to do that. Cannot do so in France, though. They're not quite scared enough. And this is where I could bring a diplomat over here and deliberately start inciting more of a panic so they'll take it seriously. Now, if you do find yourself in a position where you simply cannot get enough influence with nations to try and pass some of these different measures and slow the spread, one of the buildings you could place down is the regional office, which improves our influence in all countries in its range. Not too bad. A little on the expensive side, though, so do be ready for that. That said, I'm going to go ahead and place one down here in Belgium anyway. Get some extra influence in Europe, and hopefully I can use that to stymie the spread in France, and also ask for some more resources without people getting angry at me. Germany has reported its first case. Now, the game does tell you which nations are likely to be in danger because of the current spread. So, for example, the fact that we just saw Germany get a new infection case means that Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, Denmark, and Austria are all at risk, not to mention any air routes, etc., which I think there is. Yeah, here's all the air transport connections from Germany, so we can see all the different risk points as well for how this can spread the disease out of control very, very quickly. Now, we could tell Germany to go ahead and shut down all of its air borders, but that's a little bit difficult to do, certainly in a timely fashion before it spreads out of control. I'm not sure we're going to be able to do this, and up to this point, I haven't really had to in order to win the game, but it is an option. I mean, again, there's a lot of different ways you can approach containing the disease, to varying levels of effect. There are additional interactions we can take with other countries. For example, we can try to buy some medical supplies from them using any excess cash, or perhaps sell medical supplies or science, or maybe just give them money, etc. Some little trades we can do if we find ourselves with an abundance of one thing in particular. I haven't had that problem up to this point, but you never know. Also, some support actions. If you have the right buildings in position, you can recruit some extra units to use. You can provide tests once we actually have finished with some research to actually do testing. Or we can request some extra cooperation from them where we just give them money in order to try and gain some extra influence. Or, sorry, no, that's not correct. We reduce influence, but we increase how much money they are generating. Sorry, that's how it works. Yeah, some of the options for your units and also some random events and pop-ups are going to be determined based on how many of these different plans you have unlocked. For example, we might find ourselves in a situation with a pop-up, a random event, where if we had crisis management procedures research, we might have a more favorable result. Maybe. Hard to say for sure, but that could very well happen. Oh, here we go, another one of those random events. A new virus strain. Okay, so this is where, because of a new strain, we, one, gain some additional levels in the virus, but two, people who were immune might find themselves no longer immune, because new strains are scary. So I think we'll have to accept the extra global panic. Again, if you try to hide things, it has a tendency to come back and bite you if you're not careful. But if we found ourselves already on the brink of world anarchy, well then, we might have to just live with it. And we can see that the Rio Carnival event did just come through the timeline down to the present, and we can see that the event took place without an audience, but it wasn't perfect. Some people did get sick regardless. So another 45 people have been infected in Brazil, which means a new country is now susceptible, which is not great. We also lost some international influence because people are disappointed in our judgment call. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure how that happened. No one was supposed to be infected down there, but there you go. That is what happened. Love it. Yet another mutation for the virus. Scary. It goes up in level a little bit more, and there's some more global panic. I think we can probably work with that. We're still not quite in the red zone, so I mean, we can still incite some more fear, right? It just gives me more power. Now, I do want to try to reduce the panic just a little bit, so we're going to go for some spread prevention measures. That should give me a little bit more freedom to go for another one of these decrees. We could go for border closure resolution, which is going to reduce the spread probability with all borders by 50%, but you can see it really terrifies people and slows down the economy by a pretty massive amount. Still, I'm going to go for it anyway just because this is starting to get a little bit out of control rather rapidly in Europe and South America, so anything we can do to slow it down and protect places like, oh, actually, China got infected. Oh, crap. Well, that's not good. Yeah, protect some of the other countries, I guess, but, okay, yeah, my big moneymaker is, all of a sudden a risk factor. That means I need to speed things up a little bit. Yeah, global panic levels go up to 80% there, but that also means you're willing to donate an absolute ton to me, right? So I get all the resources now? Hooray! Alright, we do have access to a testing facility. Now, I don't think the testing facility does me a whole lot of good as far as resource generation. It does increase science points, but reduces medical supplies. So maybe we could find a really good place for this. I like the idea of placing it down in Madagascar, but this is going to cost me almost all my remaining resources, which is one of the reasons I have not been spending my cash very aggressively. We need lots of it. While we work on building the testing facility, let's go ahead and start working on some antigens. So I'm going to go for, it doesn't really matter which one, really. Let's just go for the attenuated antigen right over here. Go ahead and confirm that sucker. And then as soon as the vaccine facility is ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the vaccine lab. Actually, it looks like we can go ahead and start researching some vaccines now. Well, the red antigen has to be in one of these four, so I guess there's not a lot of harm in trying to evaluate it right now if we want to. Sure, let's go ahead and start evaluating this. I don't think it really costs you anything, but it is a little bit of a mini-game as far as figuring out which of these vaccine elements are going to be the desired element in the right place, right? We'll have to evaluate it. It'll give us a little X or a check mark saying it's in the right place, and then we keep moving things around. Now, do be aware that as you work on your vaccine, if you do have a new strain of the virus, it can reset some of the vaccine because it's no longer as effective as before. So at some point, the strains become really punishing as all of a sudden you're finding it very difficult to actually keep track of the virus. Case in point, we just had another mutation just like that. Now, global panic's already a little high, but I'm going to risk it. One of the big advantages of building a vaccine testing facility is it actually does reduce global panic. It also reduces vaccine test time. I think that number is missing here, but instead of 60 days, it takes 53 days. So having a few of these is nice, but it's very, very expensive. Once in a while, you'll also find some pop-ups for fake news. Some doctors claim that vaccines against pneumonia can protect you against the new coronavirus. We can say this is absolutely false, or yeah, the new virus is basically the same as pneumonia, so it should work, which will surely not come back to bite me in any way at all. Yeah, we're going to try to counter the fake news as much as possible. Sometimes that's going to upset people. They like that fake news. It makes them feel more safe. But, yeah, no, we're going to tell people the truth even if it hurts. We are dangerously close on the panic button right now. We're sitting at like 95, 96. Yeah, I need some of these things to start going away. We have raised a little bit too much fear, I think. Our first round of vaccine testing is complete. We can actually see that this antigen was located correctly the first time. Okay. Now, that only gives me like a 1% effectiveness of the vaccine, so we'll have to shuffle a lot of these elements around and eventually try again. Also, we have the attenuated antigen. We can go ahead and place those down as well. So we got to fill all these things in, and we got to keep trying until we get it right. Okay, next round of the vaccine testings. We actually did find a correct element over here. We are also getting some more antigens down here. Estimated success rate is 21%. It's not great, but if we started rolling this vaccine out, we could probably slow down the curve a little bit. That said, I think we can wait and complete some more testing, so that's what we're going to do. What's funny is, as I start searching for more and more countries where I want to pass some measures to try and slow the spread, I'm finding a lot of countries where I've tried multiple times to get them to do what I tell them to. And I know that part of that's because I just don't have influence and there's always a failure chance, but it's also just kind of like, why won't you guys just listen to the scientists on this one? For the love of God, just honor the 6 feet rule. And it's like, this is actually kind of realistic to some of what's going on in the real world right now. Again, I think that Jujubee did a pretty good job of trying to simulate the actual event as close to realism as they can and really try to encourage people, hey, maybe you should just respect the social gathering limits. More virus mutation. Crap. That's gonna mess with my vaccine a little bit, but now we're sitting at 59%. We're closer. Ooh, 80%. Okay, that's looking a lot better. If it's only these 3 elements, I think we can afford to do one more test. And we should be pretty dang close. Surely at least one of these, if not all of 3 of them, will be correct. I think we can afford to wait 15 more days. And by the way, that's a 100% vaccine ready to go. Okay, time to produce the vaccine. I have just enough money to pull this off. Let's go ahead and start distributing it to other countries. Now, these mass vaccinations are expensive, and it does take a lot of resources. I think this scales a little bit based on population. So without any money, this becomes a bit of a problem. Unfortunately, I don't think I can cancel these buildings and get my money back. Our diplomat is able to walk around over here and sell the vaccine and try to get a little bit of extra cash that away, which does reduce my influence with that country, but it gets them vaccinated, it gets me some much-needed cash, and it does reduce their fear level. So let's start by doing that and try to get them vaccinated. Having successfully sold the vaccine in Saudi Arabia, you can see that the infectivity radius here is dropping rather significantly. So getting that vaccine out there makes a huge difference. We can also see, by the way, the number of people who have been infected are going down month by month, and the number of cured across the world is greatly increasing. So it's a race against the clock trying to prevent as many deaths as we can at this point, but we are successfully distributing this vaccine worldwide, and it's having its desired effect. And victory is mine. Oh, gosh. All right. The infected number of people dropped so fast. And we have won. At long last, it looks like the virus finally fades away. The nightmare is over, even though we failed to develop a fully successful vaccine before it took its deadly toll. Your vigilance and crucial decision-making saved countless lives. In this case, we had it cured by, actually, let's switch this around here, July 21st, 2021, before the vaccine was distributed enough to actually destroy the virus, and almost 18 million people died. Very, very scary stuff, but the mortality rate ended up jumping to 6.21%, which is part of the reason we ended up having this much trouble. Again, bit of a slower game. It took me about an hour to get through all of this in total. Maybe about, take that back, about an hour and a half. Sorry, just looked at the clock. So yeah, slower game, slower pace. This took me about an hour and a half to get through all of it, all in all. But again, it tries to portray the numbers in a very realistic manner. It does have several different ways of approaching the disease, which reflect real life. I think the educational value alone of this game, if you guys would like to pick up this game for yourself, then of course take a look at the link in the description down below. The developers will be having a discount of 10% on the game on launch day, which is May 29th on both Steam and GOG. Thank you all very much for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed. If so, then I would ask you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.